The floor beneath my feet trembled before the station morning chime even finished resonating through the corridor. Every student in hallway 4 stopped dead in their tracks. I instinctively reached out and pressed my palm against the reinforced bulkhead. My bones are hollow, light, and optimized for the gentle, feather-like gravity of my homeworld, Vethra. A single careless impact from a high-mass species could hairline fracture my forearm. My name is Ren, and on that standard cycle aboard Orbital Academy Station 9, I felt the ground vibrate as if a piece of heavy cargo machinery had just dropped from the transport lift. It wasn't cargo. It was a single transfer student. I crept around the junction alongside my classmates, Mira, whose translucent skin flared with nervous amber luminescence, Tone, a wide-framed lad whose family hailed from the dense mineral colonies. And Fine, a quiet boy from a subterranean world who flinched at direct sunlight. Near the primary intake console stood the newcomer, holding an ordinary digital stylus that looked absurdly fragile inside his broad, blunt-fingered grip. He was broad-shouldered, standing a full head taller than most inter-system species, with suntanned skin and cropped brown hair. He wore the standard gray academy jumpsuit issued to all first-cycle transfers, but the reinforced synthetic fabric pulled tight across his chest and shoulders. His body looked as if it refused to be governed by standard station proportions. He looked up. His eyes locked onto our small cluster staring from the corner. Then, he did something that sent a collective shiver down the corridor. He smiled. It wasn't a snarl, nor was it a display of predatory dominance. It was a simple, easy tilt of his lips. But behind us, a whisper had already cut through the stillness like a cold blade. Deathworlder. In the outer systems, we only heard about Earth through fragmented conversations adults had in lowered voices before quickly changing the subject. Earth was classified under Category 12, a high-gravity pressure cooker of violent atmospheric squalls, savage apex predators. Micropathogens that mutated faster than orbital synthetics could sequence, and tectonic instability that tore landmasses apart. By all galactic models, complex biological life should have gone extinct there millions of cycles ago. Instead, small, soft-skinned mammals with no chitin armor, no natural venom, and no venom glands didn't just survive, they dominated. They built starships out of hardened alloy, broke orbit, and joined the galactic community. His intake profile flashed on the wall terminal, Ethan Brooks. Homeworld, Terra, Earth. Mira tugged at my tunic sleeve, her voice trembling. Stay against the far wall, Ren. The medical texts say if a human stumbles into you at full velocity, your internal plating will shatter. None of us knew if the rumors were exaggerated. None of us wanted to be the test subject. Instructor Okafor stepped out from the main office. She was a four-armed predator with a voice as steady as an orbital gyro. She gently touched Ethan's shoulder to usher him toward our homeroom. I watched her slender, multi-jointed fingers test the surface of his shoulder as if expecting the joint to give way under pressure. Ethan didn't even shift his weight. He adjusted his stride, matching her slow, delicate pace with methodical precision. We followed behind them at a generous safety margin. As Ethan stepped across the classroom threshold, he pulled out a chair near the perimeter and sat down with agonizing slowness. He laid his magnetic satchel onto the composite desk as if handling spun glass. I watched him closely. Before he had uttered a single word to any of us, Ethan Brooks already knew that every living creature in the room was terrified of him. Instructor Okafor introduced Ethan to the class in her usual serene cadence. Stating that he had transferred from a deep space exploration fleet outpost and would complete his secondary studies with our cohort. Would anyone like to offer our newcomer a formal academy greeting, she asked, her 4 hands resting patiently across her waist. Silence fell over the room. It wasn't malice, it was biological paralysis. When you share an enclosed, pressurized room with an organism whose ancestral line evolved by fighting mountain bears and surviving volcanic winters, your survival instincts override social etiquette. Ethan broke the awkward dead air himself. Hey everyone, he said, offering a small wave. I'm Ethan. I grew up in a mountain basin in the northern hemisphere back home. Thin air, lots of snow. Really looking forward to learning with you guys. He sounded completely ordinary. No guttural growl, no posturing. Tone, emboldened by the casual delivery, leaned forward across his desk. Is it true your planet constantly attempts to eliminate you? Ethan chuckled, running a hand through his hair. Well, that's one dramatic way to put it. We have hurricanes, tectonic quakes, predators bigger than this classroom, and diseases that wiped out millions before modern medicine. Plus, the gravity is strong enough that off-world tourists usually need pneumatic exosuits just to walk across the tarmac on day one. A collective gasp rippled through the desks. How did your people not perish? Mira asked, her luminescent scales flashing pale blue. We didn't survive by being the biggest or meanest things on the planet, Ethan answered quietly. We survived because we adapt. When something breaks us, we build back better. Earth didn't make us monsters. It just made us stubborn. I watched him throughout that first academic period. He took notes in neat, precise script. He answered basic stellar navigation questions politely. He did not growl, glare, or threaten. I almost convinced myself that the galactic encyclopedias were filled with sensationalized folklore. Then, the dismissal chime rang. SFX, loud resonant academy bell chime, chairs scraping against composite floors, dozens of students rose simultaneously, funneling toward the exit door. In the rush, Fine caught his foot on a loose strap from his satchel. His pale, subterranean frame pitched forward at high speed, rocketing straight toward a sharp, load-bearing metal stanchion next to the doorframe. A collision at that speed would have crushed his fragile frontal skull. Before anyone could scream, Ethan moved. SFX, sharp rush of air, sudden heavy metallic boot plant, it was not a conscious sprint. It was pure, unadulterated predatory reflex. Ethan's arm snapped outward in a blur, his broad hand catching Fine by the shoulder inches before impact. The kinetic force of a falling body halted instantly against the human's arm without Ethan's elbow bending even a millimeter. Ethan gently hoisted Fine back onto his feet, keeping his voice soft. Whoa there. You okay, buddy? Watch your footing. Fine stood paralyzed, his large, sensitive eyes wide with sheer terror and shock. Ethan picked up the dropped satchel, placed the strap gently in Fine's hand, and walked out into the corridor as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Mira and I locked eyes. Did you see that? She whispered, her voice barely audible. He didn't brace. He didn't strain. He caught him like a dry feather. That was the terrifying part. A being possessing that much raw, lethal force, choosing absolute gentleness, felt like standing in front of a locked steel vault. Knowing whatever was inside could kick down the door whenever it felt like it. The rumor mill on Station 9 was faster than an FTL communications array. By third period, the story of Ethan catching Fine had escalated into an urban legend. By fifth period, half the station believed Ethan had punched through a reinforced wall to stop an explosion. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw that blur of human muscle reacting before thought could even register. The encyclopedia hadn't lied. If anything, the galactic records had softened the reality to prevent universal panic. The following morning, my worst fears materialized on the digital notice boards. I stood frozen in the hallway, reading the glowing holotext 3 times. Physical education at the academy was strictly segregated by biological density classes. Low impact, fragile skeletal species like mine exercised on cushioned low-G paths. Heavy worlders like Tone had access to hydraulic iron stations in reinforced subchambers. Airborne and gliding species used vertical wind tunnels. A combined session meant all species, regardless of density, would occupy the same open arena at the same time. And that meant we would be sharing floor space with a deathworlder under physical exertion. Mira walked up beside me, staring at the announcement board with open horror. Tell me that's a clerical glitch in the mainframe. It's not, I replied, my throat dry. Look at the roster codes. Section 1A through 1D. Run. In a classroom, he's sitting still at a desk, Mira whispered, clutching her data slate. In a gymnasium, bodies move fast. People trip. Equipment swings. What happens when a deathworlder forgets to hold back? When the scheduled cycle arrived, the entrance to Gymnasium 3 felt like the gateway to a containment sector. The heavy blast doors slid open with a pressurized hiss, venting cool, hyperfiltered air. The facility was colossal, partitioned into specialized zones. Section A had memory foam floor mats and light resistance cords. Section B held massive black iron hydraulic rigs bolted deep into the station's bedrock. Section C featured towering vertical obstacle courses, and Section D housed high-velocity aerial slipstreams. Coach DeBear stood at the center court. He was an endurance-class biped with thick leathery skin, known for his relentless discipline but uncompromising dedication to safety. Listen up, cadets. Coach DeBear barked, his voice echoing off the reinforced ceiling trusses. Today is a multi-species orientation block. We are not competing. We are establishing baselines and learning spatial awareness with diverse physiology. You will rotate through each station in designated pairs. I let out a slow breath of relief. Paired exercises. Surely the automated system would pair me with Mira or another low-mass student. Coach DeBear tapped his slate. Pair 1, Tone and Varis. Pair 2, Mira and Lily. Pair 3, Ren and Ethan Brooks. My heart plummeted straight through the gymnasium floor. Mira gave me a look of pure mourning as she walked away toward the gliding lanes. I turned around slowly to find Ethan walking toward me. He had changed into standard academy athletic shorts and a sleeveless compression shirt. Seeing his exposed arms for the first time made my chest tighten. His forearms were lined with dense muscle and thick veins, his skin radiating noticeable body heat that I could feel from 2 paces away. Looks like we're partners, Ren, Ethan said with a friendly nod. Lead the way. You know these stations better than I do. Section A, I stammered, pointing a trembling finger toward the cushioned mats. Low resistance mobility and flexibility. We stepped onto the padded zone. I showed him our standard routine, slow, elongated stretches using low-tension polymer resistance bands designed to keep our delicate tendons limber without snapping bone. Ethan watched me execute a shoulder extension, then picked up an identical band. I braced myself, half expecting the polymer to snap instantly under his grip. But Ethan moved with astonishing deliberation. He scaled his motion down to match mine millimeter for millimeter, pulling the band with gentle, controlled fluidity. At one point during a lateral lunge, my foot slipped on the slick synthetic edge of the mat. I pitched sideways. Before my knee could twist, Ethan's left hand was already there, supporting my elbow with just enough upward pressure to recenter my balance. Removing his hand the exact microsecond I found my footing. Gotcha, he muttered casually. Slick spot on the seam. Thank you, I breathed, my voice barely audible. It was uncanny. His strength didn't leak out in erratic bursts, it was locked behind an internal regulator far more disciplined than any cybernetic limiter. Rotation time. Coach DeBear's whistle shrilled across the chamber. Section B, Heavy Resistance. We migrated to the heavy-density sector. Tone was already at the primary station, attempting to lift a massive, multi-tiered iron barbell calibrated for high-gravity musculature. Tone's rocky skin turned dark with strain, his vocal cords groaning as he hoisted the barbell to waist height before letting it drop with a thunderous clang that rattled the subfloor. Coach DeBear logged the metrics. Solid form, Tone. 310 kilograms standard. Who wants to run the baseline demonstration for the next cohort? Before anyone could speak, Ethan stepped forward. I can take a turn if that helps, Coach. Coach DeBear raised an eyebrow. "Brooks, this rig is set to heavy mass colonial spec. I should adjust the magnetic ballast down." "It's alright," Ethan said mild-manneredly. "Let's see how the baseline feels." Ethan walked up to the bar. He didn't execute elaborate breathing rituals or scream to pump himself up. He simply bent his knees, wrapped his hands around the knurled steel, and straightened his back. The 310-kilogram bar rose from the floor in one smooth, uninterrupted motion. Ethan held it at chest height for 3 seconds, completely silent, his breathing calm and rhythmic. Before lowering it down with such precise control that the steel barely clicked against the rubber stops. The entire gymnasium went dead silent. Tone stared at the empty barbell, his jaw slack. Coach DeBear looked from his digital data slate to Ethan, his pen frozen in midair. Did the gravity field fail?" Tone whispered in utter disbelief. Ethan smiled sheepishly, wiping his palms on his shorts. "Good balance on that bar. Well engineered." I looked around the room. Every alien cadet was staring at Ethan not as a classmate, but as a biological impossibility. The silence lingered until Coach DeBear cleared his throat, desperately attempting to restore order to his lesson plan. "Right. Moving on. Section C and D, Vertical Agility and Glide Maneuvers." We transitioned toward the high-altitude zone of the gymnasium. Overhead, Ava and Lily, our class's avian twins, spread the delicate aerodynamic membranes along their arms and leaped from a 20-meter staging tower. They caught the updrafts with breathtaking grace, gliding across the length of the hall before landing silently on the opposite platform. Ethan stood at the base of the tower, his neck craned upward, tracking their flight with wide eyes. "Man," he muttered, genuine wonder in his voice. "That is incredible. You guys can actually fly." Lily called down from the upper gantry with a teasing chirp. "Your turn, Deathworlder. Show us how your apex ancestors conquer the sky." Ethan burst out laughing, a loud, genuine belly laugh that echoed across the gym. "If I jump off that platform, Lily, the only thing I'm conquering is the concrete floor below at terminal velocity. Humans don't fly. We fall like sacks of wet lead." A ripple of nervous chuckles broke out among the students. Coach DeBear assigned Ethan to ground spotting duty, making sure his broad frame was ready to assist anyone who had an awkward landing. For the first time all day, the suffocating aura of fear began to dissolve. Seeing this terrifying being openly admit his physical vulnerabilities, that he couldn't glide, that gravity could break him too, humanized him in our eyes. Next came the climbing towers. The sheer vertical frames were designed with tiny, recessed grip points intended for cave-dwelling species with multi-jointed fingers. Fine stepped up first. With effortless instinct, his slender, pale hands darted between the micro-crevices, scurrying to the top platform in under 10 seconds. Ethan stepped up next. "Mind if I give this a shot?" He grabbed the first 2 holds. His thick fingers couldn't fit into the microslots. Instead of brute-forcing his way up and ripping the synthetic handholds off the wall, Ethan took his time, contorting his body weight, relying on friction, and methodically working his way upward. He was visibly sweating by the time he pulled himself onto the upper deck, his chest heaving with real physical exertion. Ethan leaned over the railing, grinned at Fine, and gave a breathless thumbs up. "Dude, you made that look like a walk in the park. My forearms are on fire." Fine stared at him, his cheeks flushing with quiet pride. In his entire life, no heavy worlder or high-caste student had ever praised his natural abilities. As we gathered our gear for the final testing phase of the week, Mira walked beside me. "He isn't trying to scare us, is he, Ren?" "No," I replied, watching Ethan hand a water flask to Fine. "He's spending every ounce of his energy trying not to." 3 standard cycles later, orientation ended. The real baseline performance testing began. The entire gymnasium had been configured with diagnostic telemetry gear. Every student stood in uniform rows, ready to establish their official metric profiles for the station records. Cadets. Coach DeBear announced. Station 1 is raw isometric hydraulic press. Station 2 is linear sprint. Station 3 is variable speed projectile reflex interception. Give it your maximum effort. At the isometric hydraulic rig, Tone scored a formidable 420 kilopascals, earning enthusiastic applause from the instructors. Then Ethan stepped onto the sensor plate. Brooks, Coach DeBear said, adjusting the control terminal. We have calibrated the resistance to standard human baseline estimates provided by the Coalition Navy. Push until the machine locks. Ethan set his footing, placed his hands on the twin hydraulic rams, and leaned into the machine. The digital readout on the overhead monitor spiked instantly. 400. 600, 850. 1,100 kilopascals. The hydraulic fluid lines groaned under extreme pressure. The LED numbers flashed yellow, then red. 1,500 kilopascals, system threshold reached. The machine let out a sharp pneumatic hiss and auto-disengaged to prevent motor blowout. Ethan stepped back, his face barely flushed, casually rolling his shoulders. Did it freeze? Ethan asked innocently. I had a little more left in the tank. Coach DeBear stared at his terminal in stunned silence before manually overriding the log. Metric recorded, maximum rated hardware capacity. Next came the projectile reflex testing. A pneumatic cannon mounted along the far bulkhead was designed to launch weighted synthetic spheres at varying velocities to test cognitive processing and muscle response times. Cadets took turns deflecting or catching spheres launched at 30 to 50 kilometers per hour. When Ethan took his mark in the capture circle, Coach DeBear initiated the sequence at 60 kilometers per hour, thwack. Ethan caught it with one hand before the audio crack of the launch had even bounced off the far wall. Increase velocity by 20%, Coach DeBear instructed the automated terminal. Thwack. Caught. Thwack. Caught. The machine whined as its magnetic accelerator spooled up to maximum overclock, 180 kilometers per hour. At that speed, the human eye shouldn't have been able to track the sphere. To those of us watching from the sidelines, it was nothing more than a lethal, whistling blur. SFX, deafening pneumatic blast, supersonic air crack. Before anyone could flinch, Ethan's right hand moved like lightning. Slap. He caught the high-velocity sphere clean out of the air, his arm absorbing the massive kinetic transfer with a slight backward flex. Before gently dropping the smoking projectile into the retrieval bin. The entire gymnasium fell into a silence so profound you could hear the air filtration vents cycling 3 levels above us. Ethan turned to the coach with a modest grin. Back home, we call that a fastball. The final test of the cycle was the endurance suspension station at the rear of the gymnasium. Suspended 8 meters above the rubberized floor hung a massive, multi-ton industrial steel support truss, fitted with pull rigs used to test sustained muscular stamina. The entire steel structure was anchored to the facility's ceiling by 3 high-tensile magnetic carbon cables. Fine was on the second tier of the platform, his pale hands gripping the endurance bar, working through his 3rd set of repetitions. Then, without warning, the station shuddered. A terrifying acoustic crack echoed through the arena. The primary overhead anchor cable had suffered a catastrophic shear failure, snapping like a high-voltage whip. The multi-ton steel truss tore loose from its secondary mooring. Tilting dangerously as hundreds of pounds of solid structural steel broke free from the ceiling and began falling directly toward the lower platform, where Fine was suspended. Completely trapped in the drop zone. Fine. Move. Mira shrieked. Fine froze in blind panic, his eyes wide, looking straight up at the falling mass of lethal metal. There were only 2 seconds before impact. No student was fast enough. No instructor was close enough. Except Ethan. SFX, explosive footstep impact cracking floor padding, rushing sonic boom. Ethan didn't think. He didn't evaluate danger parameters. His legs drove into the reinforced floor with explosive force, tearing through the rubberized matting as he crossed 20 meters of open gym floor in what looked like a single, physics-defying leap. He threw himself directly beneath the descending steel truss, thrusting both arms upward into the path of the falling metal. SFX, massive metallic crash, deafening shockwave and groaning steel, the impact was catastrophic. The raw kinetic force drove Ethan's boots 2 inches deep into the composite subfloor, sending shockwaves through the foundation that knocked 3 cadets off their feet. Ethan's teeth were gritted, his face flushed dark crimson, the veins in his neck bulging like steel cables as the entire weight of the collapsed industrial beam slammed into his bare palms. With a furious, primal roar that echoed through every corridor of Station 9, Ethan held the line. He didn't collapse. His spine did not shatter. His dense, deathworld-forged bone structure absorbed the impossible load. 2 feet above Fine's trembling head, the steel beam came to a dead, absolute stop. "Clear out!" Ethan roared, his voice vibrating with immense physical strain. "Get him out of the zone. Now!" Coach DeBear and Tone snapped out of their shock, sprinting forward to drag the weeping, hyperventilating Fine out from beneath the shadow of the steel. "Brace is coming!" Coach DeBear yelled, as automated emergency lifters rolled into place. Once the pneumatic emergency jacks locked beneath the truss with a hydraulic click, Ethan slowly, meticulously transferred the weight, guiding the beam onto the safety pylons before stepping back. He stood in the center of the shattered floor, chest heaving, his hands trembling slightly from the raw lactic acid burn, wiping sweat from his brow. The entire academy stood paralyzed in awe. The emergency inspection teams swarmed the gymnasium within minutes, securing the structural failure and clearing the sector. But no one was looking at the broken cable. Every eye in that facility was fixed on Ethan Brooks. Fine approached him with shaking legs, tears streaming down his pale face. You jumped under it. It was going to crush me. And you caught it." Ethan knelt down slightly so he was at eye level with the smaller boy, offering a warm, tired smile. "Where I come from, Fine, when someone is in trouble, you don't calculate the math. You just move. You did great today. Go let the medics check you over." Later that evening, after the adrenaline had subsided and the station lights dimmed to standard night cycle, I found Ethan sitting alone on the observation deck, looking out at the glittering sea of distant stars. I walked up and sat down on the bench beside him. For the first time since he had arrived, I didn't leave a safety gap between us. "Can I ask you something, Ethan?" I asked softly. "Shoot," he said, turning to me with a calm, open gaze. "When you arrived on this station, were you afraid of us? Were you afraid of coming to an alien world?" Ethan stared out into the void for a long moment, turning the question over in his mind. "I wasn't afraid of what you guys would do to me," he confessed quietly. "I was terrified of what I might accidentally do to you." He held up his calloused hands, looking at his own fingers. "On Earth, we learn from childhood to control our strength. We grow up holding delicate babies, petting fragile animals, caring for elderly grandparents whose bones are thin. When I came to this academy and saw how light and fragile everyone was compared to Earth gravity, my biggest nightmare was that a clumsy bump in the hallway would put a classmate in the hospital. The hardest part of this week wasn't lifting that steel beam, Ren. The hardest part was pretending every day that I don't have to watch every single step I take." I sat with his words in the quiet hum of the observation lounge. All week, an entire station had feared the Deathworlder because of his capacity for destruction. None of us had realized that the true mark of humanity wasn't the violence of the world that forged them, it was their boundless capacity for restraint, empathy, and protection. "You don't have to be afraid anymore, Ethan," I said gently. "None of us are." He looked at me and smiled, the same smile from the first day, but this time, it felt like home. From that day forward, no one in Academy Station 9 whispered the word Deathworlder in fear. Whenever a new transfer cadet arrived on the station, nervous and uncertain in an unfamiliar galaxy, it was always Ethan who walked up first, offering a steady, gentle hand to guide them home.